I had spent weeks preparing my yard for Christmas, lights, ornaments, and the centerpiece, a massive evergreen towering over my suburban lawn. It sparkled in the winter sunlight, reflecting the spirit of the season. I never imagined that joy would turn into a full-blown war. Then she arrived, Karen Milton, the HOA president, striding down the snowy street, her short, messy blonde hair bouncing, bold in her stance and pink winter coat. She stopped in front of my house, pointed directly at my colossal Christmas tree, and yelled, "This is a violation. That tree is too big. You're going to pay." Her voice echoed down the street, and I could hear a few neighbors peeking from their windows. As she waved her HOA violation notices, I realized she had no idea who she was dealing with. I stepped forward calmly, letting the massive red and gold decorated tree glimmer behind me, sunlight reflecting off the ornaments and lights. My hands were in my pockets, but inside, my mind was racing. I had rules, loopholes, and decades of knowledge about HOA law, and she had no clue what was coming next. The winter sun glinted off the icy gravel driveway. A couple of her HOA officers had followed, standing stiffly near their cars, unsure whether to intervene. Karen's fury was almost tangible, but I knew this confrontation was only beginning. Before we dive into this Christmas showdown, comment below where you're watching us from. I've lived in this suburban neighborhood for over 15 years, and every Christmas, my yard has been the centerpiece of festive cheer. For me, decorating isn't just a hobby. It's a passion, a way to bring joy to neighbors and create memories for my family. Over the years, I've become known for going bigger, brighter, and more creative than anyone else on the block. This year, I went all out. An enormous evergreen tree, dozens of sparkling lights, animated reindeer, garlands, and giant ornaments that reflected the sunlight like miniature stars. I remember finishing the final ornament, stepping back, and feeling a sense of pride. The neighborhood looked magical. Children playing nearby laughed and pointed. Neighbors walked their dogs past my yard, and everything felt perfect. Then came Karen Milton, the HOA president, walking down the snowy street with her signature short, messy blonde hair and bold pink winter coat. "Edward, step aside," she shouted, waving a printed HOA notice. "This tree is ridiculous. It violates every rule about size and safety." I swallowed my surprise and calmly replied, "Karen, I've checked the rules. This tree is within regulations." She scoffed, tossing the papers on the gravel driveway. "Within regulations? You're violating the spirit of the HOA. And those lights, if a single strand causes an accident, the liability falls on you. You'll be fined immediately." Her words carried authority, but I had anticipated this confrontation. Over the years, I had studied HOA bylaws, loopholes, and precedents for neighbors who had faced unfair fines. I knew exactly how to handle this. "You're claiming fines without verifying facts," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The tree is mine, the decorations are safe, and every installation meets code. If you try to enforce these threats, I'll have documentation to show your overreach." Karen's eyes narrowed. She began pacing, muttering about setting an example and keeping the neighborhood in order. A couple of her officers stood behind her, unsure whether to step in, while a few curious neighbors peeked from windows. The tension in the crisp winter air was palpable, sunlight glinting off the snow-dusted lawn and massive red and gold Christmas tree behind me. Then she tried a new tactic, intimidation. Karen pointed at the tree and yelled, "I'm calling in the HOA board, and this violation will cost you thousands. You can't just ignore authority." I smiled inwardly. This was exactly what I had prepared for. My plan wasn't just to defend the decorations. It was to turn this overreach against her, escalate in a way that would leave her scrambling. But I stayed calm, letting the snowy suburban scenery reflect serenity and holiday cheer. The massive tree behind me gleamed proudly, ornaments glinting like tiny stars, a silent challenge to her audacity. I knew this was only the first move in what would become a Christmas showdown she would regret. After Karen stormed off down the snowy street, waving her violation notice, I thought maybe the confrontation was over. But I was wrong. Within hours, her emails arrived, each one more absurd than the last. Immediate removal of oversized decorations, $500 fine for noncompliance, and board review scheduled. She clearly hadn't checked the facts. She never did. But that never stopped her from trying to assert authority. I grabbed a hot cup of cocoa and stepped out into the crisp winter air, surveying my yard filled with twinkling lights and the towering Christmas tree. It was beautiful, and I refused to let Karen ruin it. The snow glistened on the ornaments. The gravel driveway sparkled in the sun, and the warm holiday glow reflected off every surface. My neighborhood wasn't just my home, it was my canvas. The next morning, Karen returned, flanked by 2 HOA officers. She marched onto my property without invitation, her short, messy blonde hair tousled by the winter wind, her bold pink coat catching the sunlight. "Edward, I'm giving you one last chance," she said sharply. "Remove that tree or we escalate. This is community property, and you're violating every standard." I smiled faintly. "Karen, I have the deed and documentation showing the property line and compliance with HOA regulations. You're welcome to review it." Her eyes narrowed, frustration building. "Documentation doesn't matter. I enforce community standards." I shook my head. "Actually, the rules do matter. And you've overlooked a very important loophole regarding holiday decorations. According to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaw, seasonal decorations with safety clearance and proper installation aren't subject to size restrictions. You may want to read it again." Her jaw tightened, and I could see the color rise to her cheeks. That doesn't apply," she stammered. It did, and I knew it. I had spent weeks studying the HOA regulations, just in case she tried to push me around. But I also knew this would be the perfect moment to escalate. I calmly handed her a copy of the deed, installation safety approvals, and HOA bylaw excerpt, letting the sunlight glint off the massive red and gold Christmas tree behind me. The officers glanced between her and me, clearly realizing Karen had overstepped. A few neighbors began stepping outside, watching the confrontation unfold. Their curiosity turned to amusement as Karen's confident stance began to wobble. For a moment, the entire suburban street seemed frozen. The ornaments on my tree reflected sunlight like tiny stars, twinkling over the snowy ground. I could see the doubt creeping into Karen's eyes. You can't do this," she finally shouted, panic in her voice. I simply smiled, letting the peaceful winter scene contrast with her flustered frustration. "Watch me, Karen. Watch how this holiday season plays out." And just like that, the battle had moved from petty threats to a legal showdown, with a massive Christmas tree at the center of a suburban winter spectacle. By mid-afternoon, the neighborhood had begun buzzing. Word spread quickly that Karen Milton, the overzealous HOA president, was challenging my Christmas decorations. I could see curious glances from neighbors strolling past, some holding cameras or phones. The massive red and gold Christmas tree gleamed proudly in the sunlight, ornaments reflecting a spectrum of winter colors over the snow-dusted yard. Karen returned, more determined than ever. This time she wasn't alone. She brought another board member and 2 additional HOA officers. Her short, messy blonde hair poked out from beneath her scarf, and the bold pink coat made her stand out sharply against the white winter landscape. "This tree is outrageous," she shouted, waving more violation notices. "You're flaunting HOA rules, and we will make you pay." I remained calm. "Karen, I've already shown the documentation. The tree complies with all rules. I suggest you read the bylaws carefully before making more false accusations." Her face twisted with rage. "Documentation doesn't matter. You're setting a dangerous precedent." She attempted to intimidate me physically, stepping closer, gesturing wildly, pointing at the tree and the snowy gravel path. One of the officers tried to calm her, but Karen was relentless. She didn't realize her aggression was being recorded by a neighbor from across the street. I took a deep breath, feeling the chill of the winter air on my face, and decided it was time to escalate my response. Slowly, I walked around the tree, letting the ornaments sparkle in the afternoon sunlight, before stepping onto a small platform I had prepared earlier. "Everyone, please pay attention," I said loudly enough for neighbors to hear. "This tree is fully within HOA regulations. I've followed every safety guideline. In fact, this display is entirely legal." And while we're discussing legality, I gestured toward Karen, who was flustered in mid-sentence. "Let's take a closer look at the property lines and HOA bylaws that govern decoration sizes. You might find you've been enforcing rules incorrectly for months." Karen's confident stance faltered as I produced a printed diagram showing the property line and the exact measurements of the tree. Neighbors peered over fences, curious to see the showdown unfold. You can't just flaunt these rules," she stammered, visibly shaken. "I'm not flaunting them," I replied evenly. "I'm following them. And I suggest any further attempt to fine me without proper legal justification will be documented and addressed accordingly." Her face turned crimson. I could see the doubt forming, even in her bold demeanor. The officers shifted uncomfortably, realizing they had no legal ground. Even some of her own board members looked nervous, as if questioning why she had dragged us out in front of the entire street. As the sun began to lower behind the snow-capped suburban rooftops, I could see the tension give way to a strange mixture of awe and relief among the neighbors. The massive tree continued to shine, ornaments reflecting every ray of light, a silent reminder that holiday cheer and legality were on my side. By the end of the day, Karen had retreated to her SUV, muttering about consulting lawyers. The neighborhood, however, had seen everything: the massive tree, my calm stance, and Karen's unraveling temper. I knew this was only the beginning, but the first round of victory had been won. The next morning, I awoke to a neighborhood buzzing with whispers. Apparently, Karen hadn't given up. She had escalated things behind the scenes, contacting lawyers and trying to rally the HOA board to impose even harsher fines. I sipped my coffee, watching sunlight glint off the massive red and gold Christmas tree, the ornaments sparkling like miniature stars over the snowy yard. But this time, I had the advantage. Over the past week, I had meticulously collected every HOA document, deed, and bylaw related to property lines, seasonal decorations, and fines. Every loophole, every oversight Karen had relied on, I had logged. Today, I would strike back. Karen returned, bristling, accompanied by 2 board members and a small crew of HOA officers. Her short, messy blonde hair stuck out from her scarf, her pink coat vibrant against the winter landscape. She pointed at the tree and shouted, "Edward, I'm giving you one last warning. Remove that tree or face legal consequences immediately." I stayed calm, holding up a folder thick with documentation. "Karen, before you make another false claim, I suggest you review this. Every claim you've made so far is incorrect. The bylaws explicitly allow seasonal decorations of this size when installed safely, and my property lines are well within compliance." Her confident posture faltered as I laid out photographs, legal references, and official property deeds in front of the board members. Their eyes widened. Karen tried to interrupt, waving her hands, but the evidence was undeniable. "Why, you can't do this," she stammered, voice trembling slightly for the first time. I didn't." "You did try," I replied calmly. "And now it's clear that any attempt to fine me further or remove my decorations would be legally invalid." For a moment, silence fell across the snowy suburban street. Neighbors peeked from windows and over fences, cameras ready, witnessing Karen's unraveling authority. The sunlight reflecting off the massive Christmas tree made every ornament glimmer, highlighting the winter magic in contrast to her flustered anger. Then came the unexpected. One of her own HOA board members leaned toward her and whispered, clearly questioning her actions. Karen's eyes darted nervously, realizing her overreach had been exposed not only to me, but to the neighborhood. I smiled inwardly. This was a turning point. The tables had completely turned. Karen's bold, aggressive stance had collapsed under the weight of facts, legality, and neighborhood scrutiny. By the end of the confrontation, she stormed off in frustration, her officers trailing behind, while I stood tall near the glimmering Christmas tree, basking in a quiet sense of victory. The holiday lights sparkled brighter than ever, a symbol that cheer and justice could coexist, and that the HOA had underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. The following day, the neighborhood was buzzing more than ever. Word of Karen Milton's failed attempts to fine me had spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered over fences. Children giggled while pointing at the massive red and gold Christmas tree. And some even began adding small decorations of their own in solidarity. I watched from my porch, sipping coffee, sunlight glinting off the ornaments, feeling the quiet thrill of turning the tables without a single misstep. Karen returned once again, her bold pink coat stark against the winter-white neighborhood. But this time she looked smaller, less certain. 2 HOA officers and a board member flanked her, attempting to maintain authority that was rapidly evaporating. "You think you won?" she shouted, pointing at the tree. "You can't flaunt the rules like this. I'm the president of this HOA. "I'm not flaunting anything," I said calmly. "I'm following the rules. And you're now enforcing them incorrectly in front of everyone, which could have legal repercussions." Her eyes darted nervously as she realized the officers were beginning to side with logic, not her anger. I seized the opportunity. "In fact, Karen, since the community has seen the full display, perhaps it's time the neighborhood enjoys it fully. You may want to consider helping coordinate rather than threaten." Her jaw tightened. I could see her embarrassment growing as a few neighbors stepped closer to get a better view. Some had cameras out, documenting her faltering attempts to assert dominance. I could almost hear their thoughts. "She overstepped, this guy's in the right." Karen, desperate to regain control, tried a different tactic. "Fine. I'll call the city inspectors if I have to. That tree is unsafe." I smiled faintly. Please do. I've already had the decorations inspected and certified for safety. Every light, every support beam, every ornament is compliant. The inspectors will confirm it, just as the HOA bylaws do. The tension peaked when one of her own board members quietly whispered to another, and Karen's confident face faltered. She was realizing that this wasn't just about a Christmas tree anymore. It was about her authority being questioned in front of the whole neighborhood. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the snowy lawns. The massive Christmas tree glimmered brighter than ever, each ornament reflecting sunlight like miniature stars. For the first time, Karen's boldness seemed almost fragile. The officers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to proceed, while I stood calm and firm, enjoying the subtle but undeniable victory of logic, law, and holiday spirit over arrogance. By the end of the day, Karen had retreated again, muttering about consulting lawyers. The entire neighborhood had witnessed her repeated failures, and for the first time, her authority was publicly questioned. Meanwhile, the Christmas tree sparkled proudly, ornaments reflecting both the winter sun and the realization that justice had prevailed, even during the holidays. By now, the entire neighborhood had noticed the ongoing Christmas saga. Snow crunched under my boots as I stepped outside, surveying the massive red and gold Christmas tree sparkling in the winter sunlight. Every ornament reflected light, like tiny stars, glimmering over the snowy gravel driveway. I knew Karen wouldn't give up without one final, desperate attempt. Sure enough, that afternoon, she appeared again, more determined, more frantic. Her short, messy blonde hair was slightly disheveled, her bold pink coat striking against the crisp white snow. She wasn't alone this time. She brought 2 city inspectors and another HOA officer. The tension was palpable. "Edward, you have gone too far," she shouted, pointing at the tree. "These inspectors will confirm this is unsafe, and you'll be fined or forced to remove everything." I took a deep breath, keeping calm. "Karen, as I mentioned before, every installation meets safety standards. I've had a licensed inspector review the setup, and I have the certification right here." I calmly handed the paperwork to the inspectors. They examined the decorations, measuring supports, lights, and spacing carefully. Meanwhile, Karen fumed, shouting over them, attempting to intimidate me in front of everyone. You can't just ignore the rules," she yelled, flustered. "I am the HOA president." "Actually," I replied evenly, "you've been misapplying the rules. Section 12, paragraph 4 of the bylaws allows for seasonal decorations like this, provided safety standards are met. And these inspectors confirm everything is compliant." The inspectors nodded, visibly impressed with the setup. Karen's confidence began to crumble. Her face reddened, and for the first time, she seemed unsure of how to respond. I turned toward the neighbors, now watching from their windows and yards. "Neighbors, you've all seen the tree, the decorations, and the safety checks. This display is entirely legal, and I encourage everyone to enjoy it." The crowd murmured in agreement, some cheering quietly. Karen's flustered attempt at authority were completely overshadowed. She muttered something about consulting lawyers, then stormed off, her officers trailing behind, unsure how to salvage her authority. Standing by the sparkling tree, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The decorations were safe, beautiful, and fully compliant, and Karen's overreach had been publicly exposed. The winter sunlight reflected off the ornaments, illuminating the gravel driveway, the snow, and the proud red and gold tree, the ultimate symbol of holiday victory. By evening, the neighborhood was abuzz with stories about Karen's repeated failures. Children ran past, pointing at the sparkling tree. Neighbors took photos, and for the first time, I truly felt the joy of Christmas mingling with the thrill of victory. Karen had pushed too far, and this year, the holiday had been won. The day had grown colder, but the sparkling Christmas lights of my massive red and gold tree reflected warmth across the snowy suburban street. Neighbors were stepping outside, cameras in hand, marveling at the display that had become the talk of the neighborhood. Karen Milton hadn't returned since her last humiliating attempt with the city inspectors. Her bold pink coat and flustered expressions were replaced by whispers of her repeated failures. I walked around the gravel driveway, checking the lights and ornaments one last time. Everything was perfect. The snow-covered lawn, the glinting ornaments, the towering tree. It all symbolized a holiday triumph against overreach. Suddenly, a few children ran up to the edge of my property, pointing excitedly. "Mr. Langford, the tree is amazing." I smiled and waved, realizing that while Karen had tried to ruin the season, she had inadvertently turned it into a neighborhood spectacle everyone loved. Later, a small group of neighbors approached. thanking me for standing up to the HOA's arbitrary rules. Karen really overstepped, one said. We're glad you didn't back down. Their approval felt like icing on the cake. The neighborhood had united in admiration and holiday cheer. Even the HOA officers who had been involved cautiously nodded in acknowledgement, no doubt questioning Karen's decisions. It was clear. Her authority had been publicly undermined, and for the first time, she seemed aware of the consequences of her actions. I took a deep breath, letting the crisp winter air fill my lungs. The sun reflected off the massive Christmas tree, ornaments shimmering against the snow like tiny stars, while the quiet hum of carolers and laughter drifted from neighboring homes. This year, the holiday spirit had triumphed over petty rules and abuse of power. As evening fell, I stepped onto the porch and glanced back at the yard. The tree stood tall and proud, a symbol not just of Christmas cheer, but of victory, resilience, and logic prevailing. Karen Milton had underestimated me, and the neighborhood had witnessed every moment of her failed attempts. This holiday season, I had won, not just for me, but for everyone who loves Christmas joy and a little justice. And that's how I stood my ground and turned Karen Milton's overreach into a holiday victory. The massive Christmas tree stayed, the neighborhood celebrated, and justice, plus a little holiday cheer, prevailed. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more HOA drama and epic showdowns.